So Anicca is one of the words from the Pali language, and there are so many that don't easily translate into English. The translation that we usually hear is that it means change, that things are changing, but this doesn't really go to the heart of what Anicca is. We have this misunderstanding that things take form, they survive for some time, and then they change, and then that continues through our experience of life. But actually, what Anicca really means is not change, but it means an endless, a continuous process of change. That nothing takes its shape, that the mind itself doesn't change, that the mind is change. It is this endless flow of thoughts, moods, feelings, and emotions, and any other mind activity that we can think of. So it just flows. It's like a river. We have this concept of a river. It's very clear to understand. When I use the word river, if you're an English speaker, then you know exactly what I mean. So we have that fixed in our mind, but actually, river is just a label on a process. And the process is changing all the time, in moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. We have the water that's moving. We have the fish and the creatures that live inside the water. We have the plants that grow and decay inside the water. We have the banks of the river. Everything is in a constant procession of change. It's not static. It's useful in language to say, oh, that's a river there. We say, oh, yes, that's a river. But when we look for the river, we don't find anything that isn't changing. And so how is it when we look for this being we call self, that this body is changing, not just through old age, sickness, and finally death, but moment to moment, at the subatomic level. These subatomic particles are rising and passing away. The Buddha spoke about this 2,600 years ago, and he called them kalapas. And modern physics, quantum mechanics now, have supported this, that the body itself is not something solid, but it's an energy field. It's moving and flowing all the time. And when we understand this, not as an intellectual idea, but from our own direct experience through meditation, then how we understand the body, and then consequently how we understand all life, naturally changes. It evolves. And we're not lost in the idea of pain and pleasure, that there is a way to be with the body, to be accepting, to transcend the limitations of the body and be at peace with it, because we have understood that there isn't one thing that you can grasp at. That what we call the body is just a process of change. And we have all these labels, and the problem is that we believe the labels. We believe the labels to be the truth, whereas actually the labels are just easy concepts on top of the truth. So when we often go back to where we were born, to the town that we were born in, certainly my experience of this, being a much older man now, is that it's beyond recognition. That's not how I remember it when I was a child. It changes. So we see that the buildings change, some disappear, some new ones arrive, and we say, well, that's change. But in reality, every person moving in and out, every moment of life is bringing some kind of change to it. It's not just these gross changes. So to understand Anicca, we have to go really underneath that superficial level of understanding that all things change. But life doesn't change. Life is change itself. Life is Anicca. And that the mind doesn't change. The mind is change itself. The mind is Anicca. And these are the things that we need to look at. And of course, the perfect vehicle for this observation is our meditation. The meditation that we call Vipassana. That we take a posture, something in this way, or there are many postures you can take. And we just be with those changes. We can say we observe them, but that's not really how to understand it properly. We experience the changes, the moment-to-moment changes, beginning with the grossest form of change that we can experience, which is that the breath comes in, the breath comes out, this anapanasati. And then as the mind becomes clearer, we can see the movement of the mental activity, thoughts, moods, feelings, emotions, all changing, all arising and passing away. Nothing there to be held on to, nothing to be grasped at, nothing to... If we could hold on to our happiness, that's what we would do, surely. Because happiness is a pleasant experience. But we can't hold on to it because it changes. We don't change it, it changes. And we can experience that change. And as we begin to experience the changes in the mind, then once our understanding is cultivated or developed, then we can be at peace with all those things we don't control, which is everything. Because everything is in a process of change. Everything is already moving away from you. By the time you reach to grasp it, it's already moving away. Now this can be disturbing, I think, for people. But there's no reason for it. It is the nature of things, whether you understand it or not. It's still the nature of things. It's still how things are. So Anicca was this teaching, given by the Buddha. This man, my great hero. He said, don't believe him, don't believe me. Don't believe anything I'm telling you. But test it. Test it for yourself, and then you will know. And you will know the reality of change. You will know the reality of anicca. You will know the reality of anatta, the emptiness of a permanent or fixed self-identity. If everything is changing, where is this part that doesn't change? And you can look, and you should. You can examine the panchakhandhas, the 5 aggregates. You can examine this being that we call self. Which part of this being can you experience that never, ever, ever changes? For more than 2,600 years, people have been doing this, looking for that one thing. So far, nobody found it. You can create belief systems. That's a very different thing. Here we're talking, this Vipassana practice is very scientific. You're conducting a scientific experiment on yourself. So we have anicca, and then we have dukkha, we have anatta, the emptiness of a self-identity. And because we're always grasping at self to make it real, to make it solid, to make it substantial in life, and always failing, because there isn't anything to hold on to, we experience what's called dukkha. Dukkha is one of those words, like anicca and like anatta, which are translated into English and oversimplified. So we have a misunderstanding that anatta means no self. It's not what it means, no self. It means no fixed or permanent self. That what is self is itself a process of change, an endless stream of change, like a river. We don't know where it begins and we don't know where it ends, but it just flows through, changing all the time. It is said you can't put your hand in the same river twice. My teacher told me that you can't put the same hand in the same river once, because everything is in a process of change. Hand is a useful concept, but it's not a reality. It's not solid and static and unchanging. So dukkha is usually translated as suffering, but this is a grossly oversimplistic translation. If you are a person whose first language is not English, then you know it's very difficult, often impossible, to translate one word from your language into English or vice versa, just by one word, just by substituting one word for another. So to say that the Buddha said, and this is really commonly understood, that the Buddha's teaching begins with the 4 Noble Truths, and the first Noble Truth is life is suffering. Well, there are many reasons why the Buddha could not have said this. And the first one is that, of course, he didn't speak English. And so that's an expression that he could not use. And also, that's not what dukkha really means. It is a word with many aspects of meaning. And the closest, at least in my mind, that we can get to it is unsatisfactory or unsatisfactoriness. That the Buddha, if we look at the Pali translation, he said he spoke about the Dukkha Arya Satcha, the noble truth of Dukkha, or we could speak in English now, the noble truth of the unsatisfactory nature of life, that everything we grasp at, everything we want is already changing and moving away. There isn't anything we can hold on to. Every experience you have can be bettered. Everything, it can be made bigger or smaller or faster or slower, sweeter or more sour or salty. Everything can be improved because it's not completely satisfying. So our relationship to life, and we have our bodies, and we have this passage through life, this old age, sickness and death. And many times a day we meet that experience of unsatisfactoriness. So that's the nature of life as we experience it. We're too hot, we're too cold, we're not comfortable enough, the bed is too soft or it's too hard. All these different variations. And there's nothing wrong with any of it. There's nothing wrong with any of it. But we have to be at peace with it. We have to recognize this is the nature of life. That everything is in a process of change, including this being that we call self. One moment I'm happy, then I'm confused, then I'm disappointed, then I'm concerned. All these different manifestations of mind and the body itself. That one moment you have pain or you have an itch. Next moment you're comfortable, your legs go to sleep. Everything's changing all the time. And we're always adjusting to that change. We go to bed at night, and bed is probably the most comfortable piece of furniture we have in the house. And yet we move and toss and turn all night. Why? If it's so comfortable, why do we have to move? Because pain arises in the body. Well, pain is just another aspect of changing conditions. So the Buddha said we have to understand his final teaching in this kind of forest area called Kusinaga. He was an old man, he was 80 years old. This is according to our traditional stories. But he was 80 years old, an old man in India 2,600 years ago. And all his monks and lay followers had gathered to be at the passing of this great man, this great Dhamma master. And Ananda went to his little kuti and said, Bhante, everyone is here. They want you to give one last teaching before you leave us. And the Buddha said, reluctantly said, okay. And he took his tired, old, sick body out and sat something like this and gave this final Dhamma talk. He said, whatever arises passes away and is not what you are. Now work hard to understand this truth. Whatever arises passes away. That is the nature of all phenomena. Everything is in this process of change. Whatever arises passes away. But it's not you. These thoughts that you meet, the most beautiful or the worst, they're not you. There's something that's happening that the quality of awareness can be aware of. Whatever arises passes away and is not what you are. Now work hard to understand this truth. That is the teaching from the Buddha, the last one. Work hard to understand this. Give your effort to understanding the nature of the mind, because it is the mind that creates the world that you experience. Whether it's a heaven world or a hell world, you're doing that. Because the world outside, the external world, the samsara, is just as it is. The tree that we see is just the tree. The flower that we see is just the flower. Whether we like it or not, whether we approve or not, whether we accept or not, that's coming from us. So once we have this understanding that everything's arising, passing away, anicca, behind that never-ending flow of change, there is nothing. There isn't something that we can find that doesn't change. And if we don't understand that, then we meet the third part, which is the dukkha, the unsatisfactory relationship with life. The Buddha is my great hero. And his teaching was exemplified by my own teacher. Someone that truly I was happy to bow at the feet of. to receive his wisdom and his teaching and his humor and his love and his joy. But in the end, the work that needs to be done, we have to do for ourselves. No one can do it for us. We have to understand we sit in meditation. Meditation is called Vipassana, to see things as they really are. Not as we think they are, not as we think they should be, not as we think we would like them to be, but actually as they are. The reality of this universe, that everything is in a constant process of change. Behind that change, there is nothing that you can take a hold of and say, that's it, that's me, there I am. There's the essential part of me. And without understanding that, we wander in this realm of unsatisfactoriness. So these are the teachings of the Buddha, Dukkha, Anicca, Anatta. Something to be really reflected upon, not just analysed intellectually. The intellectual part of our being is important, of course, but it's not where the truth is. To find the truth, we have to harmonise with the silence and allow the truth itself to reveal itself to us as we sit without waiting, but we just sit. We sit and be part of this anicca. The breath comes in, the breath goes out. The body feels sensations or pains or itches, whatever in the body. And we just understand through our experience of those things, the understanding, the wisdom, the panya begins to arise. So this is our simple practice to understand the reality of this being that we call self. And so I offer this afternoon for your consideration and your reflection. And may you all be well.